Hey, it's me, Jetski, and today we're talking about Lost Media, specifically about Crash Bandicoot Lost Media. Now, I know I haven't done a proper one of these in a hot minute now, but I'm trying to get back into the swing of things. Now, before we start, I will have to ask you to please like and sub, as it really helps out the channel. We're trying to hit 500 subscribers sooner than later. Anyways, let's hop right into the video. The first piece of Crash Bandicoot Lost Media we will be discussing today is a game called Crash Landed that was cancelled in 2010-ish. Now, this was to be one of the biggest games in the Crash Bandicoot franchise literally ever. It was supposed to be incredibly open and very unique compared to previous Crash games. Now, there are two versions of Crash Landed, one intended for the DS and another intended for the Xbox 360 and PS3. So you might be wondering, well, what happened to this game? Why wasn't it ever finished, completed, or released at all? And that's a good question. Well, it turns out the company making this game, called Radical Entertainment, got acquired by Activision, and Activision was not very impressed with the progress on Crash Landed, and they up and canceled the game and held on to Crash Bandicoot for a few more years. Eventually, however, they finally made Crash Insane Trilogy, which was a remake of the first three Crash Bandicoot games, and they also made Crash 4, It's About Time. But back to Crash Landed, it is maybe one of the most interesting pieces of lost media that I've talked about on this channel, because despite it being pretty well known, there's almost next to nothing out there about it, outside of some concept animations and some early tech demos. Outside of the DS version of this game, I couldn't find a single ounce of footage from Crash Landed, at all. Not a single bit of it from the PS3 and Xbox 360 version. And you might say, well, did they even have a functioning version of this game on the Xbox 360 and PS3? And to that I argue, yes, they did. There's actual screenshots everywhere. At first, when I seen these pictures, I thought they were just little mock-ups, but then I slowly realized, no, these are in-game pictures. Now, this really led me to really wonder about the validity of that statement, that they just hadn't made enough progress, and that's why the game was actually canceled. I don't know if I believe that now, to be honest with you. I mean, an outsider looking in, and I'm not a game developer at all, I know next to nothing about game development, but from an outsider looking in, this game did look pretty far along, I won't lie to you. Now, I have a few theories myself of why I think the game might have actually been canceled. Now, my first theory for why this game got canceled is a pretty simple one. When Activision acquired Radical Entertainment, Activision simply might have not liked the direction that Radical Entertainment was taking Crash Bandicoot and decided to scrap it. It's honestly a pretty simple answer, but it's quite plausible. I mean, it's happened a lot in the video game industry. They simply might have just wanted to save them for their big franchise at the time, that being Skylander. Skylander was really big in the 2010s era, and they might have just wanted to save Crash for that. They did the same thing for Spyro as well. It sucks, but I think that might have been their plan at the time, and one of the reasons they canceled Crash Landed. Another theory of mine of why this might have got canceled is simply due to the money it would cost to market this game. If you don't know, this game had a big marketing plan going for it. There was going to be a huge McDonald's tie-in or whatever to go alongside the game. They had this DVD box set that was going to go alongside it as well. And maybe Activision's seen this and just simply did not want to put up the money, especially because they didn't know how profitable the game would have actually been. If you don't know, Crash wasn't actually in his biggest era ever in the late 2000s. The last big game they had was Crash the Titans, and if you don't know, Crash the Titans was not very good, and it definitely helped taint a lot of Crash Bandicoot's reputation in the game industry, and they didn't know if he was going to be as profitable as he once had been, so they simply might have just said, you know, this is going to cost way too much money to market this game. With the plans you guys are putting forward, we're just going to can the whole thing altogether. I am once again going to state that those are just speculation. I have no way of confirming those at all. That's pretty much all I have to say, though, for Crash Landed. On to the next piece of lost media. The next piece of Crash Bandicoot Lost Media is actually a canceled show. Now, the canceled show was supposed to come out around the same time the Insane Trilogy came out. Unfortunately, though, it got canceled due to complications with Amazon. There's not very much of it known. There might be a longer pilot somewhere out there, however, it's unknown. The only proof of its existence is a short little animation test with really rough audio. It's publicly known on YouTube. I'll put a link to it in the description below if you want to check it out. It's really interesting, though. I think the most interesting thing about this little cartoon or whatever, though, is the animation style. It's really fluid. I think it runs at a crisp 24 frames per second, and if you don't know anything about animation, that's really impressive, especially since this is actually hand-drawn. It's really cool looking, and it's really impressive that they got it to run at 24 frames per second. I don't know if the final shell would have looked this good, but man, it kind of makes me wish that this was actually finalized. I think it's really funny and pretty goofy overall, though. It's a real shame that this show never got made. That's pretty much all I have to say for this little one, though. It's not a big one or anything like that. It's not as interesting or expansive as Crash Landed, but it is what it is. That's pretty much all I have to say for this one. On to the next one. Alright, so this next piece of lost media relating to Crash Bandicoot is a really bizarre one, but it's still really interesting, and I don't think there's been anything found about it in a long time. So in the early 2000s, Spyro and Crash had this weird crossover thing going on, but it was only on like handheld consoles or whatever. It never had like a big mainline crossover on like a bigger console like the PlayStation 2 or anything. It was very much like a smaller scale thing. However, they had these tie-in things in the cereal boxes. Now, on the back of these little cards or whatever that came in the cereal boxes, you could enter the code that was on the back of those cards into this website for Crash Bandicoot. It was called Crash Online, and if you entered those codes in, you'd be able to play these little online games or whatever. Now, all these online games, not a single one of them is available to play at all. They're all completely lost. I don't know anything about almost any of them. The only one I could really find was a screenshot of one where you fly around as Crash in a jetpack or something. I don't really know what the goal is in that game, but that was the only one I could really find. I do think I should also mention that all the Spyro ones are also completely lost. I don't know how anybody would find these. It's honestly like near impossible to find any of these games, simply due to the fact that none of these games were actually properly archived ever, so pulling them up on like the Internet Archive simply will not work. This is such an unfortunate piece of lost media, because honestly, I don't see this getting found for a long time. I feel like somebody with like the actual code of these little mini games that you could play on Crash Online would have to like leak them somehow, and I don't even know how they would do that. Not to mention the fact that there's possible like problems with like disk rot or something like that, if they even still had the ROMs, to be honest. It's happened before. For example, there was a version of Sonic Generations on the PSP that got leaked a while back, but there wasn't very much that could be obtained from the ROM due to disk rot, so I don't know, that could be something that also plagues this investigation as well. It's just a really unfortunate piece of lost media that I don't see getting solved for a long time, if ever, to be honest. I know it's pretty unfortunate, but that's pretty much all I have to say about this piece of lost media. If you have any information about it, tell me about it in the comments below. On to the conclusion. In conclusion, Crash Bandicoot has a lot of interesting pieces of lost media out there, whether that be Crash Landed or Crash Online, those little mini games. It's really interesting, and I know it's sad to think about how much lost media there is out there, and all you can really do is hope it gets found someday. I don't really know. Sometimes, you know, you won't get the results you want. Sometimes lost media is kind of like a hunt that you'll never really solve. And honestly, with something like Crash Online, I don't see it getting solved. However, with Crash Landed, it is possible to still salvage that game maybe somehow one day. That's pretty much all I have to say for this video. If you guys liked it, please like and sub. It really helps out the channel. It was a Mia Jetski, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.